Real change happens when you stop letting your mind hold you back, learn to outsmart your doubts, and step into the life you deserve. The psychology of change. Outsmart your brain and change your life. Before we dive in, you can subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy the books I publish here. Comment where you're listening from and the time there. It's always cool to see. Now, listen, grow, and hopefully you fall asleep. Chapter 1. The Midnight Promise That Never Comes True. Picture this moment with me. It's 11:47 p.m. and you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. Your mind is racing with possibilities, painting vivid pictures of tomorrow's transformation. You can almost taste the fresh morning air as you imagine yourself jogging through the neighborhood. You can feel the satisfaction of that perfectly prepared breakfast, the energy coursing through your veins from finally taking control. Tomorrow, you whisper to yourself, tomorrow is the day I become who I'm meant to be. But here's what most people don't understand about this midnight ritual we've all performed countless times. This isn't just wishful thinking. This is your brain's most sophisticated survival mechanism working against your deepest desires for transformation. I've spent the last 15 years studying the intricate dance between human intention and behavioral change, and what I've discovered will fundamentally shift how you approach personal transformation. The story I'm about to share isn't just about habit formation. It's about understanding the hidden psychological forces that have been sabotaging your efforts since day one. Let me take you back to a moment that changed everything for me. I was 17, sitting in my high school psychology class when my psychology teacher announced with absolute certainty, "Class, it takes exactly 21 days to form any new habit." The room buzzed with excitement. 21 days? That seemed almost too good to be true. That afternoon, I made a decision that would teach me one of life's most valuable lessons about the gap between scientific truth and popular mythology. I decided to become a bedmaker. Not the most glamorous transformation perhaps, but it seemed achievable. For 21 days, I would make my bed every single morning at exactly 6 a.m., no matter what. The first week felt like climbing Mount Everest in flip-flops. Every morning, my alarm would pierce through my dreams, and I'd drag myself out of bed, muttering complaints under my breath. The sheets seemed to have developed a personal vendetta against me, refusing to cooperate as I struggled to create those perfect hospital corners I'd seen in magazines. Week 2 brought a glimmer of hope. The routine felt slightly less torturous. My hands began to remember the motions, and I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, this 21-day theory held water. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. On day 22, something fascinating happened. I opened my eyes, felt that familiar morning grogginess, and without any conscious thought, my mouth opened and these words tumbled out. "A family member, please don't forget to make my bed today." I had failed, spectacularly, and in that moment of failure, I stumbled upon a truth that would reshape my understanding of human behavior forever. The 21-day myth isn't just wrong, it's dangerously misleading because it sets us up for the exact kind of failure I experienced. It creates unrealistic expectations that lead to crushing disappointment when our brains don't magically rewire themselves in 3 weeks. But the real secret isn't what you think. The failure of my bed-making experiment wasn't a personal shortcoming. It was a window into understanding how change actually works in the human brain. And once you understand these mechanisms, you'll never approach personal transformation the same way again. The truth about behavioral change is far more complex and infinitely more empowering than any 21-day quick fix. It involves understanding neuroplasticity, the role of environmental triggers, the psychology of identity formation, and the hidden power of what scientists call implementation intentions. Throughout this journey together, we're going to explore the real science behind lasting change. We'll uncover why your brain resists transformation, how to work with your neural pathways instead of against them, and most importantly, how to create sustainable change that actually sticks. But first, we need to understand where this 21-day myth came from and why it spread like wildfire through the self-development world. Because understanding the origin of this misconception is the first step toward embracing a more effective approach to personal transformation. Are you ready to discover what your brain has been hiding from you all along? Chapter 2. The Surgeon's Discovery That Fooled the World. The year was 1954, and a plastic surgeon was about to make an observation that would inadvertently mislead millions of people for decades to come. As a plastic surgeon working in New York, this surgeon possessed the keen observational skills that made them exceptional at their craft. But it was their curiosity about human psychology that led them down a path that would forever change how we think about habit formation. The surgeon began noticing something peculiar among their patients. After performing a nose job, they observed that patients typically took about 21 days to stop feeling surprised when they looked in the mirror. The same pattern emerged with other procedures. Patients who had undergone facial reconstruction would spend roughly 3 weeks adjusting to their new appearance before it began to feel natural. But here's where it gets really interesting. The surgeon extended their observations beyond cosmetic surgery. They noticed that patients who had lost limbs continued to experience phantom sensations for approximately 21 days before their brains began adapting to the new reality. This phenomenon fascinated them, and they began documenting these patterns meticulously. In their mind, they were witnessing the brain's adaptation process in real time. What they didn't realize was that they were observing a very specific type of psychological adjustment that had little to do with habit formation as we understand it today. This surgeon published their observations in a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, which became a massive bestseller, selling over 30 million copies worldwide. The book's success wasn't just due to its insights about self-image and goal achievement. It was the promise of transformation in just 21 days that captured the public imagination. Now here's the mistake that destroys most people's progress. This surgeon never claimed that all habits could be formed in 21 days. They were specifically discussing the time it took for people to adjust to changes in their physical appearance or body image. But somewhere between their original research and the countless self-help books that followed, this crucial distinction got lost. The transformation of this surgeon's observation into universal law happened gradually, like a game of telephone played across decades. Authors began citing this work as proof that any habit could be formed in 21 days. Motivational speakers embraced the concept because it offered hope and seemed achievable. Life coaches built entire programs around this timeline. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything about how we understand this phenomenon. This surgeon was observing passive adaptation, not active habit formation. When you lose a limb, your brain doesn't have a choice but to adapt. When you get a new nose, your visual cortex must adjust to process the new information. These are involuntary neurological adaptations, not the complex behavioral patterns we call habits. The difference is profound. Passive adaptation happens to you, while habit formation requires consistent, intentional action from you. It's the difference between your brain adjusting to a new pair of glasses and training yourself to automatically reach for those glasses every morning. The appeal of the 21-day myth is understandable. First, 21 days feels manageable. It's long enough to seem legitimate, but short enough to maintain motivation. Second, it offers the tantalizing promise of rapid transformation. Who wouldn't want to completely rewire their life in less than a month? This psychological appeal explains why the myth spread so rapidly through popular culture. It gave people hope and a concrete timeline for change. Publishers loved it because books promising transformation in 21 days sold better than those suggesting it might take months or years. But the most powerful technique is still coming, and it involves understanding what actually happens in your brain when you try to form a new habit. The real timeline for behavioral change is both more complex and more empowering than the 21-day myth suggests. Modern neuroscience has revealed that habit formation involves multiple brain systems working in concert. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for conscious decision-making, must gradually hand over control to the basal ganglia, which manages automatic behaviors. This transfer of control doesn't happen on a fixed timeline. It depends on the complexity of the behavior, the consistency of practice, the environmental context, and individual neurological differences. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves understanding these variables and working with them rather than against them. Instead of fighting your brain's natural resistance to change, you learn to leverage its existing patterns and gradually reshape them. But before we dive into the real science of habit formation, we need to examine what happens when people try to apply the 21-day rule to complex behavioral changes. The results are often frustrating, sometimes devastating, and always illuminating about how change actually works in the real world. Chapter 3: The real science behind lasting transformation. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as a lead researcher prepared to conduct what would become one of the most important studies in behavioral psychology. It was 2009, and this researcher was about to shatter the 21-day myth with rigorous scientific methodology that would finally give us accurate insights into how habits actually form. This researcher's study at University College London followed 96 volunteers over 12 weeks, tracking their progress as they attempted to form new habits. But here's what most people don't understand about this groundbreaking research. This researcher wasn't just measuring time. They were mapping the intricate process of neurological change that occurs when behaviors transition from conscious effort to automatic response. Each participant chose a specific habit to develop. Some selected simple behaviors, like drinking a glass of water after breakfast. Others chose more complex routines, like doing 50 sit-ups after their morning coffee or taking a 15-minute walk after dinner. What emerged from this study would revolutionize our understanding of behavioral change forever. The results were both shocking and liberating. The average time for a behavior to become automatic was 66 days, not 21. But the real revelation lay in the range of individual differences. Some participants automated simple habits in just 18 days, while others required up to 254 days for more complex behaviors to become second nature. But the final piece that ties it all together isn't just about time. It's about understanding the three distinct phases of habit formation that this researcher's research revealed, and how you can navigate each phase strategically to maximize your chances of success. Phase 1 is what I call the conscious effort stage. During this period, which typically lasts 2 to 4 weeks, every repetition of your new behavior requires significant mental energy and conscious decision-making. Your prefrontal cortex is working overtime, constantly reminding you to perform the behavior and fighting against your brain's natural resistance to change. This is where most people give up. They expect the behavior to feel natural quickly, and when it doesn't, they interpret the ongoing effort as evidence that they're failing. But understanding that this struggle is not only normal but necessary can completely change your relationship with the discomfort of early habit formation. Phase 2 is the gradual automation stage. This phase can last anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks, depending on the complexity of your chosen behavior. During this period, you'll notice something fascinating happening. Some days, the behavior will feel almost automatic, while other days it will require significant effort again. This inconsistency isn't a sign of failure. It's evidence that your basal ganglia is beginning to take over from your prefrontal cortex. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure during this phase involves what neuroscientists call environmental design. Instead of relying purely on willpower, you begin structuring your environment to make the desired behavior easier and competing behaviors more difficult. Phase 3 is the automatic response stage. This is when the behavior becomes truly habitual. You perform it without conscious thought, and not performing it actually feels uncomfortable. Your brain has successfully transferred control from the energy-intensive prefrontal cortex to the efficient basal ganglia. But here's the mistake that destroys most people's progress during this journey. They focus exclusively on the timeline instead of understanding the underlying mechanisms that drive habit formation. The real secret isn't about counting days. It's about optimizing the 4 key variables that determine how quickly and successfully habits form. Variable 1 is behavioral complexity. Simple habits like taking a vitamin with breakfast can become automatic relatively quickly because they require minimal cognitive processing. Complex habits like learning a new language or mastering a musical instrument take longer because they involve multiple neural pathways and require more extensive rewiring. Variable 2 is consistency frequency. This researcher's research revealed that missing 1 or 2 days didn't significantly impact habit formation, but longer gaps could reset the process. The key insight here is that perfection isn't required, but consistency is crucial. Variable 3 is environmental context. Habits form faster when they're anchored to existing routines and performed in consistent environments. Your brain uses contextual cues to trigger automatic behaviors, so the more stable your environment, the faster the habit will solidify. Variable 4 is intrinsic motivation alignment. Habits that align with your core values and identity form faster than those imposed by external expectations. When you're trying to become someone, rather than just do something, your brain's reward systems become more engaged in the process. Now here's where it gets really interesting. This researcher's research also revealed the concept of habit strength, which measures how automatic a behavior has become. This strength isn't binary, it exists on a continuum, and understanding where you are on this continuum can help you adjust your strategy accordingly. The most powerful technique is still coming, and it involves leveraging what psychologists call implementation intentions to accelerate the habit formation process. But first, we need to understand why your brain resists change in the first place, and how you can work with these resistance mechanisms instead of against them. Your brain's resistance to change isn't a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism that has kept our species alive for millions of years. Understanding this resistance is the first step toward developing a more compassionate and effective approach to personal transformation. But the real breakthrough comes when you realize that lasting change isn't about overpowering your brain's resistance. It's about understanding how to gradually reshape your neural pathways through strategic repetition, environmental design, and identity alignment. Are you ready to discover the specific strategies that can help you navigate each phase of habit formation with greater ease and effectiveness? Chapter 4: Why your brain fights change like a security guard. Imagine your brain as the world's most sophisticated security system, one that's been protecting you for your entire life. Every time you attempt to change a behavior, alarms start blaring in the neural equivalent of a control room. Red lights flash, sirens wail, and your brain's security team springs into action with one primary mission: maintain the status quo at all costs. This isn't a metaphor. This is literally what happens in your brain when you try to change. And understanding this process will transform how you approach personal transformation forever. The security guard in your head has a name: the anterior cingulate cortex. This remarkable brain region acts as your personal change detector, constantly monitoring for deviations from established patterns. When you decide to wake up 30 minutes earlier, skip your usual afternoon snack, or take a different route to work, this neural sentinel immediately recognizes the deviation and sounds the alarm. But here's what most people don't understand about this resistance. Your brain isn't trying to sabotage your goals out of malice. It's trying to protect you based on millions of years of evolutionary programming that equates change with danger. Let me share a story that illustrates this principle perfectly. A marketing executive decided to transform their morning routine. Instead of checking their phone immediately upon waking, they committed to spending the first 30 minutes of each day journaling and meditating. Simple enough, right? On day one, the executive felt energized and optimistic. The new routine felt refreshing, almost rebellious against their old patterns. But by day 3, something interesting began happening. They started experiencing what they described as morning anxiety. Their heart would race slightly when they reached for their journal instead of their phone. Their mind would flood with urgent thoughts about emails they might be missing, deadlines they might forget, opportunities that could slip away. This executive wasn't experiencing a character flaw or lack of willpower. They were experiencing their brain's sophisticated threat detection system in action. Their anterior cingulate cortex had identified the routine change as a potential threat and was flooding their system with stress hormones designed to motivate them to return to familiar, safe behaviors. The real secret isn't what you think, though. This resistance isn't something to overcome through brute force. It's something to understand, respect, and gradually redirect. Your brain's security system can become your greatest ally in creating lasting change, but only if you know how to work with it instead of against it. Now here's where it gets really interesting. A neuroscientist discovered that you can actually observe this resistance in real time using brain imaging technology. When people with obsessive-compulsive disorder resist their compulsions, specific brain regions light up like a Christmas tree, showing the intense neural effort required to override automatic behaviors. But the most powerful technique is still coming. This neuroscientist developed a 4-step process that allows you to work with your brain's resistance rather than fighting it. This process, originally designed for treating OCD, has profound implications for anyone trying to change ingrained habits. Step 1 is relabel. Instead of thinking, "I don't want to do this new behavior," you learn to recognize the feeling as, "This is my brain's security system activating." This simple cognitive shift transforms resistance from a personal failing into a predictable neurological response. Step 2 is reattribute. You learn to attribute the discomfort to brain chemistry rather than external circumstances. When the executive felt anxious about not checking their phone, they learned to think, "This anxiety isn't because something terrible is happening. It's because my anterior cingulate cortex is detecting a pattern change." Step 3 is refocus. Instead of fighting the uncomfortable feelings, you acknowledge them and then deliberately redirect your attention to the new behavior. The executive would say to themselves, "I notice my brain is resisting this change, and I'm going to gently focus on my journaling anyway." Step 4 is revalue. Over time, you begin to see the resistance as valuable information rather than an obstacle. The discomfort becomes a sign that you're successfully creating new neural pathways. But here's the mistake that destroys most people's progress during this process. They expect the resistance to disappear quickly, and when it doesn't, they interpret ongoing discomfort as evidence that the change isn't working. In reality, the resistance often intensifies before it diminishes, like a security system that becomes more sensitive when it detects persistent attempts to bypass it. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves understanding what neuroscientists call extinction bursts. When you stop reinforcing an old behavior, your brain doesn't give up immediately. Instead, it often increases the intensity of the urges, almost as if it's making one last desperate attempt to restore the familiar pattern. If the executive had understood extinction bursts, they wouldn't have been surprised when their phone-checking urges became almost overwhelming around day 7 of their new routine. They would have recognized this intensification as a sign that their brain was beginning to rewire, not evidence that they was failing. The final piece that ties it all together involves leveraging what psychologists call cognitive load theory. Your brain has limited processing capacity, and change requires significant mental resources. This is why attempting multiple major changes simultaneously often leads to failure. Your neural security system becomes overwhelmed and shuts down all change attempts to preserve energy. Understanding this limitation allows you to approach change strategically. Instead of trying to overhaul your entire life at once, you focus on one significant change at a time, giving your brain's security system time to adjust and accept the new pattern before introducing additional modifications. But the real breakthrough comes when you realize that your brain's resistance to change contains valuable information about how to make change easier. The intensity of the resistance often correlates with the significance of the change and the strength of the existing neural pathways you're trying to modify. Are you ready to discover how to turn this resistance into your greatest asset for creating lasting transformation? Chapter 5: The Identity Trap That Keeps You Stuck. Picture yourself standing in front of a mirror, but instead of seeing your physical reflection, you're looking at the story you tell yourself about who you are. This story, woven from years of experiences, decisions, and feedback from others, forms what psychologists call your identity narrative. And here's the shocking truth. This narrative might be the single greatest obstacle standing between you and the changes you desperately want to make. Most people approach change by focusing on behaviors, but they're fighting the wrong battle. The real war for transformation happens at the level of identity, and until you understand how to navigate this battlefield, you'll find yourself trapped in cycles of temporary progress, followed by inevitable regression. Let me introduce you to a software engineer who spent 3 years trying to become a runner. Every January, they would buy new running shoes, download training apps, and commit to a rigorous exercise schedule. For the first few weeks, they would maintain the routine religiously. They'd wake up early, lace up their shoes, and pound the pavement with determination. But by March, the same pattern would emerge. They'd skip a day due to bad weather, then another due to work stress, then another because they didn't feel like it. Within weeks, the running shoes would be gathering dust in their closet, and this individual would be back to their sedentary lifestyle, feeling frustrated and defeated. This individual wasn't failing because they lacked willpower or motivation. They were failing because they were trying to change their behavior without changing their identity. Deep down, this individual saw themselves as someone who doesn't exercise. Every time they went for a run, they were acting against their core identity, creating psychological tension that eventually became unbearable. But here's what most people don't understand about identity and behavior change. Your identity isn't fixed. It's a dynamic story that you're constantly updating based on evidence from your actions. The problem is that most people wait for their identity to change before they change their behavior, when the process actually works in reverse. The real secret isn't what you think. Identity change happens through what psychologist Dr. Benjamin Hardy calls identity-based evidence accumulation. Every time you perform an action, you're casting a vote for the type of person you want to become. The key is to focus on accumulating evidence for your desired identity rather than trying to overhaul your entire self-concept overnight. When this individual finally understood this principle, everything changed. Instead of trying to become a runner, they focused on becoming someone who prioritizes physical health. Instead of committing to hour-long runs, they started with 5-minute walks around their neighborhood. Each walk became evidence that they were the type of person who cared about fitness. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Your brain has a powerful mechanism called cognitive consistency bias that compels you to act in ways that align with your self-perception. When this individual began seeing themselves as someone who prioritized health, their brain started looking for ways to maintain consistency with this identity. The 5-minute walks naturally evolved into longer walks, then into jogging intervals, and eventually into the running routine they had struggled to maintain for years. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything about how identity transformation works. You can't simply decide to adopt a new identity through positive thinking or affirmations. Identity change requires what psychologists call behavioral proof. Your subconscious mind only accepts identity shifts that are supported by consistent evidence from your actions. This is why traditional goal setting often fails. When you set a goal like, I want to lose 30 pounds, you're focusing on an outcome rather than an identity. But when you shift to, I want to become someone who makes healthy choices, you're focusing on the type of person who naturally achieves that outcome. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves understanding the 3 levels of identity change that must occur for lasting transformation. Level 1 is surface identity adjustment. This involves making small changes to your daily routines that provide evidence for your desired identity. If you want to become a writer, you start by writing for just 5 minutes each day. The goal isn't to produce great work immediately, it's to accumulate evidence that you're the type of person who writes. Level 2 is core belief restructuring. As you accumulate behavioral evidence, your deeper beliefs about yourself begin to shift. You stop thinking, I'm not a creative person, and start thinking, I'm someone who expresses creativity through writing. This shift happens gradually and often below the level of conscious awareness. Level 3 is integrated identity embodiment. At this level, the new identity becomes so integrated into your self-concept that acting in alignment with it feels natural and effortless. You don't have to remind yourself to write. You write because that's who you are. But here's the mistake that destroys most people's progress during identity transformation. They try to skip directly to level 3 without building the foundation of behavioral evidence required for sustainable change. They adopt grandiose identities like, I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm a fitness enthusiast, without first accumulating the small, consistent actions that support these identities. The most powerful technique is still coming, and it involves what I call identity bridging. Instead of trying to leap from your current identity to your desired identity, you create intermediate identities that serve as stepping stones. This individual didn't try to go directly from couch potato to marathon runner. They first became someone who takes daily walks, then someone who enjoys outdoor exercise, then someone who challenges themselves physically, and finally someone who runs regularly. Each identity shift was supported by months of consistent behavioral evidence. But the final piece that ties it all together involves understanding how your environment either supports or undermines your identity transformation. Your physical surroundings, social connections, and daily routines all send constant signals about who you are and who you're becoming. When this individual wanted to strengthen their identity as someone who prioritized health, they made strategic environmental changes. They placed their walking shoes by the front door, subscribed to fitness podcasts, and joined a local hiking group. Each environmental cue reinforced their evolving identity and made healthy choices feel more natural. The real breakthrough comes when you realize that identity change isn't about becoming someone completely different. It's about uncovering and strengthening aspects of yourself that already exist, but may have been dormant or underdeveloped. Are you ready to discover the specific strategies for designing an environment that supports your identity transformation and makes lasting change feel inevitable? Chapter 6: The Environment Design Revolution. Walk into any McDonald's restaurant anywhere in the world, and you'll witness one of the most sophisticated examples of environmental design in human history. The red and yellow color scheme triggers appetite and urgency. The layout guides you toward the counter in a specific pattern. The menu boards are positioned at precise angles to optimize decision-making speed. Even the height of the chairs is calculated to encourage faster eating and quicker table turnover. McDonald's understands a fundamental truth that most people ignore when trying to change their lives. Environment shapes behavior more powerfully than willpower ever could. While you're relying on motivation and self-discipline to drive your transformation, successful organizations are using environmental design to make desired behaviors feel automatic and inevitable. But here's what most people don't understand about environmental influence on behavior. Your surroundings aren't just affecting your choices in obvious ways. They're constantly sending subconscious signals that either support or undermine your identity transformation, often without you realizing it. Dr. Brian Wansink's groundbreaking research at Cornell University revealed just how profound environmental influence can be. In one study, a researcher gave moviegoers either medium or large containers of stale popcorn. The popcorn was so old that people made faces of disgust while eating it. Yet those with large containers ate 34% more than those with medium containers, despite the terrible taste. The size of the container overrode their conscious taste preferences and hunger signals. If environment can make people eat more food they actively dislike, imagine what it could do to support behaviors you actually want to develop. Let me share the story of a director of wellness who conducted one of the most elegant environmental design experiments ever documented. As the director of wellness at Massachusetts General Hospital, this individual was frustrated by the cafeteria's poor food choices and their impact on employee health. Instead of launching another awareness campaign about healthy eating, they decided to redesign the environment. This director made simple but strategic changes. They moved bottled water to eye level in all refrigerated cases and placed it near every cash register. They relocated healthier snacks to more prominent positions and made less healthy options slightly less convenient to reach. They didn't remove any food options or change any prices. They simply altered the environment to make healthier choices easier and less healthy choices slightly more difficult. The results were remarkable. Water sales increased by 25.8%, while sugary drink sales decreased by 11.4%. Healthier snack purchases increased significantly, while junk food sales declined. This director had achieved what years of health education campaigns couldn't accomplish, simply by changing the environment. Now here's where it gets really interesting. This director's success wasn't just about making healthy food more visible. They were leveraging what behavioral economists call choice architecture to reduce what psychologists term decision fatigue. Every day you make thousands of micro decisions, from what to wear, to what to eat, to how to respond to emails. Each decision depletes your mental energy, leaving you with less willpower for the choices that matter most. By the evening, your decision-making capacity is often so depleted that you default to whatever requires the least mental effort. But the real secret isn't what you think. The goal of environmental design isn't to eliminate choices. It's to structure your environment so that the choices aligned with your goals require less mental energy than the choices that work against them. When I decided to become someone who read more books, I didn't rely on willpower to remember to read. Instead, I redesigned my environment strategically. I placed books on my nightstand, coffee table, and kitchen counter. I removed my phone charger from my bedroom and placed it in the living room. I subscribed to physical magazines and left them in my bathroom. Each environmental change made reading slightly easier and phone scrolling slightly more difficult. I wasn't eliminating options. I was tilting the playing field in favor of my desired behavior. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves understanding what environmental psychologists call behavioral affordances. Every object in your environment either affords certain behaviors or constrains them. A comfortable chair affords sitting and relaxing. A treadmill affords exercise. A bowl of fruit on your counter affords healthy snacking. The key insight is that you can strategically design your environment to afford the behaviors you want and constrain the behaviors you want to avoid. This isn't about willpower, it's about engineering your surroundings to make success more likely. But here's the mistake that destroys most people's progress when they try environmental design. They focus only on their physical environment while ignoring their social and digital environments, which often have even more powerful influences on behavior. Your social environment includes the people you spend time with, the conversations you have, and the social norms of your various communities. If you're trying to develop healthier eating habits, but your friend group always suggests meeting at fast food restaurants, your social environment is working against your goals. Your digital environment includes your phone settings, app arrangements, social media feeds, email subscriptions, and online habits. If you're trying to read more, but your phone is filled with addictive apps and your social media feeds are optimized for endless scrolling, your digital environment is sabotaging your efforts. The most powerful technique is still coming, and it involves what I call environmental layering. Instead of making one dramatic change to your environment, you make multiple small changes across all three environmental domains: physical, social, and digital. Let's say you want to become someone who exercises regularly. In your physical environment, you might lay out workout clothes the night before, place your gym bag by the front door, and keep a water bottle visible on your desk. In your social environment, you might find a workout partner, join a fitness community, or follow inspiring fitness accounts on social media. In your digital environment, you might set phone reminders for workout times, download a fitness app, and unsubscribe from sedentary entertainment options. Each individual change might seem small, but together they create what behavioral scientists call environmental momentum. Your surroundings begin working in concert to support your desired identity and behaviors. But the final piece that ties it all together involves understanding the concept of environmental reset points. These are moments when you have the opportunity to redesign your environment with minimal resistance. Moving to a new home, starting a new job, beginning a new relationship, or even rearranging your furniture creates temporary windows when old environmental patterns are disrupted and new ones can be established more easily. The real breakthrough comes when you realize that environmental design isn't a one-time activity. It's an ongoing process of observation, experimentation, and refinement. You become a scientist of your own behavior, constantly testing how small environmental changes affect your choices and adjusting accordingly. Are you ready to discover the specific implementation strategies that will help you design an environment that makes your desired changes feel automatic and inevitable? Chapter 7. The Implementation Intention Revolution that changes everything. Imagine having a secret weapon so powerful that it could double your chances of following through on any commitment you make. A psychological tool so effective that Olympic athletes, Fortune 500 CEOs, and world-class performers use it to guarantee their success. This weapon exists, It's been scientifically validated in over 100 studies, and most people have never heard of it. It's called implementation intentions, and once you understand how to wield this tool, you'll never approach goal achievement the same way again. But here's what most people don't understand about why their best intentions fail to translate into consistent action. The gap between intention and behavior isn't a character flaw or a willpower deficit. It's a planning problem that can be solved with surgical precision using a specific psychological framework. Let me take you inside the mind of a psychologist who discovered this revolutionary approach to behavior change. In the early 1990s, this psychologist was studying why some people consistently followed through on their goals while others, despite having identical motivation and capability, repeatedly failed to take action. What they discovered would fundamentally change how we understand the relationship between planning and performance. This psychologist found that people who used a specific type of planning were 200 to 300% more likely to achieve their goals than those who relied on traditional goal-setting methods. The difference wasn't in what they planned to do, it was in how they planned to do it. Traditional goal-setting follows a simple formula: I will achieve X. For example, I will exercise 3 times this week, or I will eat healthier meals, or I will wake up earlier. These are what psychologists call goal intentions, and while they're necessary for direction, they're insufficient for execution. But the real secret isn't what you think. The magic happens when you transform goal intentions into implementation intentions using a deceptively simple formula. If X happens, then I will do Y. Instead of I will exercise 3 times this week, you create, if it's Monday, Wednesday or Friday at 7 a.m., then I will put on my workout clothes and go to the gym. Instead of I will eat healthier, you create, if I'm hungry between meals, then I will eat an apple or drink a glass of water. This might seem like a minor linguistic adjustment, but the neurological impact is profound. When you create an implementation intention, you're essentially programming your brain with an automatic response pattern. You're creating what this psychologist calls instant habits that bypass the need for conscious decision-making in the moment. Now here's where it gets really interesting. This psychologist's research revealed that implementation intentions work by leveraging 2 powerful psychological mechanisms that most people never consciously access. Mechanism 1 is situational cueing. When you specify the exact situation that will trigger your behavior, your brain begins scanning the environment for that cue. The situation becomes a mental bookmark that automatically reminds you to act. You're essentially outsourcing the responsibility of remembering to your environment rather than relying on your already overloaded conscious mind. Mechanism 2 is response automation. When you pre-decide exactly what you'll do in a specific situation, you eliminate the cognitive burden of making that decision in the moment. Your brain can execute the predetermined response without engaging the energy-intensive prefrontal cortex that's responsible for complex decision-making. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates the power of this approach. A researcher conducted a study with people who wanted to increase their fruit and vegetable consumption. One group simply set the goal to eat more fruits and vegetables. The second group created implementation intentions like, if I eat lunch, then I will eat a piece of fruit, and if I prepare dinner, then I will include 2 vegetables. The results were staggering. The goal-setting group increased their fruit and vegetable consumption by an average of 1 serving per day. The implementation intention group increased their consumption by an average of 2.9 servings per day. Same motivation, same capability, but nearly 3 times the results simply by changing how they planned. But here's the mistake that destroys most people's progress when they try to use implementation intentions. They create vague or overly complex if-then statements that their brain can't easily process. Effective implementation intentions must be specific, realistic, and immediately actionable. Vague implementation intention. If I have free time, then I will work on my book. This doesn't work because free time is too ambiguous, and your brain won't recognize the cue reliably. Specific implementation intention. If I finish dinner and clean the dishes, then I will sit at my desk and write for 30 minutes. This works because the cue is concrete and the response is clearly defined. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves understanding the 3 types of implementation intentions that address different aspects of behavior change. Type 1 is initiation intentions. These help you start behaviors by linking them to specific environmental or temporal cues. If it's 6 a.m. and my alarm goes off, then I will immediately get out of bed and drink a glass of water. Type 2 is maintenance intentions. These help you continue behaviors when you encounter obstacles or temptations. If I feel like skipping my workout because I'm tired, then I will remind myself that I always feel better after exercising and do just 10 minutes. Type 3 is disruption intentions. These help you stop unwanted behaviors by creating alternative responses to triggering situations. If I feel stressed and want to eat junk food, then I will take 5 deep breaths and go for a 5-minute walk instead. But the most powerful technique is still coming, and it involves what I call implementation intention stacking. Instead of creating isolated if-then statements, you create chains of implementation intentions that build momentum throughout your day. Here's how this works in practice. Let's say you want to develop a morning routine that includes exercise, healthy eating, and focused work. Instead of creating separate implementation intentions for each behavior, you create a connected sequence. If my alarm goes off at 6 a.m., then I will immediately get out of bed and put on my workout clothes. If I finish putting on my workout clothes, then I will drink a glass of water and do 20 minutes of exercise. If I finish exercising, then I will shower and prepare a healthy breakfast. If I finish breakfast, then I will review my priorities for the day and start my most important task. Each behavior becomes the cue for the next behavior, creating what behavioral scientists call a habit chain that requires minimal willpower to maintain once established. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Recent neuroscience research has revealed that implementation intentions actually change your brain structure over time. A neuroscientist found that people who consistently use implementation intentions develop stronger connections between their prefrontal cortex and their motor cortex, making it easier to translate intentions into actions. But the final piece that ties it all together involves understanding how to use implementation intentions to overcome what psychologists call the intention-action gap. This is the frustrating phenomenon where you know exactly what you should do, you're motivated to do it, but you still don't follow through consistently. The intention-action gap exists because your brain treats intentions and actions as separate processes. Intentions are processed in your prefrontal cortex, while actions are initiated in your motor cortex. Implementation intentions create a direct bridge between these brain regions, essentially short-circuiting the normal decision-making process. But here's the breakthrough insight that most people miss. Implementation intentions aren't just planning tools, they're identity reinforcement mechanisms. Every time you follow through on an if-then statement, you're providing evidence that you're the type of person who keeps commitments to themselves. This evidence accumulates over time, strengthening your identity as someone who follows through on their intentions. The real transformation happens when you realize that implementation intentions can be applied to every aspect of behavior change we've discussed so far. You can use them to navigate your brain's resistance to change, to accumulate evidence for your desired identity, and to optimize your environment for success. For example, if I notice my brain resisting a new behavior, then I will remind myself that this resistance is normal and continue with my planned action anyway. This implementation intention helps you work with your brain's security system rather than against it. Or, if I complete my daily writing session, then I will say to myself, I am someone who writes consistently, and mark an X on my calendar. This implementation intention reinforces your identity as a writer while providing visual evidence of your progress. The advanced practitioners of implementation intentions understand that the real power comes from creating what I call meta-implementation intentions. If-then statements about how to create and refine other if-then statements. If I notice that one of my implementation intentions isn't working, then I will spend 5 minutes analyzing why and creating a more specific version. If I successfully follow an implementation intention for 1 week, then I will create a new implementation intention to build on that success. Are you ready to discover how to combine implementation intentions with the psychology of momentum to create unstoppable progress toward your goals? Chapter 8: The Momentum Equation That Guarantees Success. There's a moment in every transformation journey that separates those who achieve lasting change from those who remain trapped in cycles of starting and stopping. It's not when you feel motivated, inspired, or ready. It's the moment when you discover how to generate momentum from nothing and sustain it through any obstacle. Most people think momentum is something that happens to them, a lucky streak, a burst of motivation, or a period when everything seems to align perfectly. But momentum isn't magic. It's a psychological and neurological phenomenon that can be engineered, amplified, and sustained using specific scientific principles. Let me introduce you to the momentum equation, a framework that has helped thousands of people create unstoppable progress toward their most important goals. This equation reveals why some people seem to effortlessly maintain positive changes while others struggle with consistency, even when they have identical knowledge and resources. The momentum equation consists of 4 variables: micro-wins, visible progress, identity reinforcement, and environmental momentum. When these variables work together, they create what physicists call a positive feedback loop, a self-reinforcing cycle where each success makes the next success more likely. But here's what most people don't understand about momentum in behavior change. Traditional approaches focus on big, dramatic changes that feel significant but are difficult to sustain. The momentum equation works in reverse, using tiny, almost insignificant actions to generate psychological forces that make larger changes feel inevitable. Variable 1 is micro-wins, and this is where most people get momentum completely wrong. They think they need to achieve something substantial to feel successful, but neuroscience research reveals that your brain's reward system responds more powerfully to frequent small victories than to occasional large ones. A researcher's groundbreaking research at Harvard Business School analyzed over 12,000 diary entries from employees across 7 companies. This researcher discovered that the single most important factor in maintaining motivation and positive emotions was what she called the progress principle, the experience of making meaningful progress on work that matters, no matter how small that progress might be. Your brain releases dopamine not just when you achieve a goal, but when you make progress toward a goal. The key insight is that you can trigger this neurochemical reward system multiple times per day by designing micro-wins into your change process. Let me share the story of a software developer who wanted to write a novel. For years, they had set ambitious goals like write 1,000 words per day or complete a chapter per week. These goals felt meaningful, but they were so challenging that they rarely achieved them. Each failure reinforced their belief that they wasn't a real writer. Everything changed when this individual discovered the power of micro-wins. Instead of trying to write 1,000 words, they committed to writing just 1 sentence per day. 1 sentence. That's it. This goal seemed almost laughably small, but that was precisely the point. This individual could achieve this micro-win even on their busiest, most stressful days. Each day they wrote their sentence. Their brain released a small hit of dopamine and reinforced their identity as someone who writes consistently. But here's where it gets really interesting. After 2 weeks of writing 1 sentence per day, something unexpected happened. This individual found themselves naturally writing more. Some days they'd write a paragraph, other days they'd write several paragraphs. The micro-win had created momentum that pulled them toward larger actions. Within 6 months, this individual had completed the first draft of their novel, not because they forced themselves to write more, but because the momentum generated by consistent micro-wins made writing feel natural and enjoyable. Variable 2 is visible progress, and this addresses a critical flaw in how most people track their transformation journey. Your brain needs to see evidence of progress to maintain motivation, but most people only measure outcomes rather than the behaviors that create those outcomes. Traditional progress tracking focuses on lagging indicators, things like weight loss, income increase, or skill mastery that take weeks or months to change. But momentum requires leading indicators, daily behaviors and small improvements that you can measure immediately. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves creating what I call a progress dashboard, a visual system that tracks both your daily actions and their cumulative impact over time. For example, if you're trying to improve your fitness, your progress dashboard might include: daily, did I exercise for at least 10 minutes? Yes, no. Weekly, how many workouts did I complete? Number. Monthly, how do I feel about my energy levels? 1 to 10 scale. Quarterly, what physical improvements have I noticed? Qualitative notes. This multi-layered approach ensures that you always have evidence of progress, even when long-term results aren't yet visible. Variable 3 is identity reinforcement, and this is where the momentum equation becomes truly powerful. Every micro win and every instance of visible progress becomes evidence for your evolving identity. But most people miss the crucial step of consciously connecting their actions to their identity. The breakthrough technique involves what I call identity anchoring, explicitly linking each small action to the type of person you're becoming. When this individual wrote their daily sentence, they didn't just check it off a list. They said to themselves, I am someone who writes every day, no matter what. This simple statement transformed a behavioral action into identity evidence. But the most powerful technique is still coming, and it involves understanding how to use what psychologists call implementation spirals to accelerate momentum beyond what seems possible. An implementation spiral occurs when success in one area of your life creates energy and confidence that spills over into other areas. When this individual established their writing habit, they noticed that their increased sense of self-efficacy made it easier to tackle other challenging projects at work. The momentum from one small change began influencing their entire life. Variable 4 is environmental momentum, and this involves designing your surroundings to amplify the psychological forces we've been discussing. Your environment can either support momentum or destroy it, often in ways you don't consciously recognize. Environmental momentum works through what behavioral scientists call contextual priming. When your environment consistently reminds you of your goals and makes positive behaviors easier, it creates a psychological tailwind that reduces the effort required to maintain momentum. This individual created environmental momentum by leaving their laptop open to a blank document each night, placing a notebook and pen on their kitchen table, and setting a daily phone reminder that said, "Time to add to your story." Each environmental cue reinforced their identity as a writer and made the behavior feel more automatic. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Recent research in neuroscience has revealed that momentum creates actual structural changes in your brain. A neuroscientist's studies using brain imaging technology show that consistent practice of new behaviors strengthens the neural pathways associated with those behaviors, while weakening the pathways associated with old, unwanted patterns. This means that momentum isn't just psychological, it's neurological. The more momentum you build, the easier it becomes to maintain positive changes and the harder it becomes to revert to old patterns. But here's the mistake that destroys most people's progress when they try to build momentum. They focus on maintaining perfect consistency rather than developing resilience to setbacks. Momentum isn't about never failing, it's about recovering quickly when you do. The advanced practitioners of momentum understand what I call the recovery protocol, a systematic approach to getting back on track after inevitable disruptions. The recovery protocol has 3 steps. Step 1, acknowledge without judgment. When you miss a day or make a mistake, you simply acknowledge what happened without self-criticism or elaborate explanations. Step 2, identify the smallest possible restart action. Instead of trying to make up for lost time, you focus on the tiniest action that will reconnect you with your momentum. Step 3, execute immediately. you take the restart action as soon as possible, ideally within 24 hours of the disruption. This individual used this protocol when they missed 3 days of writing due to a work crisis. Instead of trying to write 3 sentences to catch up, they simply wrote 1 sentence and acknowledged that they were back on track. This approach prevented a temporary setback from becoming a permanent derailment. But the final piece that ties it all together involves understanding how to use momentum to tackle increasingly challenging goals over time. As their confidence and capability grew, they could gradually increase the difficulty of their micro wins without losing the psychological benefits that make momentum sustainable. The real breakthrough comes when you realize that momentum isn't just a tool for achieving specific goals. It's a meta skill that transforms how you approach every challenge in your life. Once you understand how to generate momentum from nothing, you become unstoppable in any domain you choose to focus on. Are you ready to discover the final framework that will help you maintain your transformation for life, even when motivation fades and circumstances change? Chapter 9. The Transformation Maintenance System That Lasts Forever. The phone call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. A successful marketing director who had transformed their health, relationships, and career over the previous 2 years was crying on the other end of the line. "I don't understand what happened," they said through tears. "Everything was going so well, and then it all just fell apart." This individual's story isn't unique. In fact, it's heartbreakingly common. Research shows that 92% of people who achieve significant positive changes in their lives will experience what psychologists call transformation decay within 18 months. They'll gradually drift back toward their old patterns, often without realizing it's happening until the regression is nearly complete. But here's what most people don't understand about maintaining lasting change. The skills required to create transformation are completely different from the skills required to sustain it. Most people become experts at starting, but never learn the art of maintaining. They master the sprint, but never develop the endurance for the marathon. This final chapter isn't about motivation or inspiration. It's about building what I call a transformation maintenance system, a comprehensive framework that protects your progress against the inevitable challenges, setbacks, and life changes that will test your commitment to growth. The transformation maintenance system is built on a foundation that most self-help approaches completely ignore: the assumption that motivation will fade, circumstances will change, and you will face periods when maintaining your positive changes feels difficult or impossible. Instead of pretending these challenges won't occur, we prepare for them systematically. Let me take you inside the mind of a researcher whose work on behavior change has influenced millions of people worldwide. This researcher spent decades studying why some people maintain positive changes for years while others relapse within months. What they discovered revolutionized our understanding of long-term transformation. This researcher found that people who maintain lasting change don't rely on willpower or motivation. Instead, they develop what they call change maintenance competencies, specific skills and systems that protect their progress against predictable threats. The first competency is pattern recognition mastery. People who maintain lasting change become experts at recognizing the early warning signs of regression before they become serious problems. They develop what I call transformation radar, the ability to detect subtle shifts in their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that indicate they're drifting away from their desired patterns. This individual's transformation began to unravel 3 months before their midnight phone call, but they didn't recognize the warning signs. They started skipping their morning meditation just for a few days during a busy work period. They began eating lunch at their desk instead of taking breaks. They stopped calling their accountability partner because they didn't have anything interesting to report. Each of these changes seemed minor and temporary, but together they represented a systematic dismantling of the systems that had supported their transformation. By the time this individual realized what was happening, they had already lost significant ground. But here's the real secret that most people never discover. Transformation maintenance isn't about preventing all setbacks. It's about developing the ability to detect and correct course deviations quickly, before they compound into major regressions. The advanced practitioners of transformation maintenance use what I call the weekly transformation audit, a systematic review process that helps them stay connected to their progress and catch potential problems early. The weekly transformation audit consists of 5 questions. Question 1. What evidence did I create this week that I'm becoming the person I want to be? This question helps you maintain awareness of your progress and reinforces your evolving identity. Question 2. What patterns or behaviors did I notice that don't align with my desired identity? This question helps you identify potential problems before they become entrenched. Question 3. What environmental factors supported my positive changes this week? This question helps you recognize and strengthen the conditions that facilitate your success. Question 4. What environmental factors made positive changes more difficult this week? This question helps you identify and address obstacles proactively. Question 5. What one adjustment could I make next week to better align my actions with my desired identity? This question ensures continuous improvement and prevents stagnation. The second competency is flexibility without compromise. This involves learning to adapt your methods while maintaining your core commitments. Life will inevitably present circumstances that make your current approaches difficult or impossible to maintain. The key is developing alternative strategies that preserve your progress even when your preferred methods aren't available. Let me share the story of an executive who had developed a powerful morning routine that included meditation, exercise, and journaling. This routine had transformed their stress levels, decision-making ability, and overall life satisfaction. But when their company went through a major restructuring that required them to travel extensively, their routine became impossible to maintain. Instead of abandoning their commitments entirely, this executive developed what I call minimum viable versions of each practice. When they couldn't do their full 20-minute meditation, they did 3 minutes of deep breathing. When they couldn't get to the gym, they did body weight exercises in their hotel room. When they couldn't journal for 15 minutes, they wrote 3 sentences about their day. These minimum viable versions weren't as comprehensive as their full routine, but they maintained their momentum and preserved their identity as someone who prioritized personal development. When their travel schedule normalized, they were able to return to their full routine without having to rebuild their habits from scratch. But the most powerful technique is still coming, and it involves understanding how to use what psychologists call implementation flexibility to maintain your transformation through any life change or challenge. Implementation flexibility means having multiple pathways to the same outcome. Instead of relying on a single approach to maintain your positive changes, you develop a toolkit of strategies that can be adapted to different circumstances. For example, if your goal is to maintain physical fitness, your toolkit might include primary strategy, gym workouts 3 times per week; travel strategy, bodyweight exercises and walking; injury strategy, swimming or physical therapy exercises; time-constrained strategy, high-intensity 10-minute workouts; low motivation strategy, gentle yoga or stretching. Having multiple pathways ensures that you can maintain progress regardless of what life throws at you. The third competency is social system architecture. This involves deliberately designing your social environment to support long-term maintenance rather than just initial change. Most people focus on finding support for starting new behaviors, but neglect to build systems that will sustain those behaviors over years. The research is clear. People who maintain lasting change have stronger social support systems than those who relapse. But here's what most people get wrong about social support. It's not just about having people who encourage you. It's about having people who hold you accountable, challenge you to grow, and model the behaviors you want to maintain. This individual's transformation began to unravel partly because their social support system was designed for change initiation, not change maintenance. Their accountability partner was great at celebrating early wins, but didn't know how to help them navigate the more subtle challenges of long-term maintenance. The advanced strategy involves building what I call a transformation support ecosystem. a network of relationships that serves different functions in your maintenance journey. Your ecosystem should include an accountability partner who checks in regularly and helps you stay committed to your core practices, a mentor who has successfully maintained similar changes and can provide guidance during challenging periods, a peer group of people who are on similar transformation journeys and understand the unique challenges of long-term change, a professional support team, coaches, therapists, trainers who can provide expert guidance when needed. But here's the mistake that destroys most people's progress when building social support. They focus on finding people who will always be positive and encouraging, rather than people who will tell them the truth about their progress and hold them to high standards. The fourth competency is meaning maintenance. This involves staying connected to the deeper reasons why your transformation matters, especially during periods when the benefits aren't immediately obvious. The initial stages of change are often fueled by excitement, novelty, and rapid progress, but long-term maintenance requires a different kind of motivation, one based on values, identity, and long-term vision rather than immediate gratification. A survivor and psychiatrist discovered that people can endure almost any hardship if they have a clear sense of meaning and purpose. This principle applies powerfully to transformation maintenance. When you stay connected to the deeper meaning behind your changes, you can persist through periods of difficulty, boredom, or slow progress. The advanced practitioners of transformation maintenance regularly engage in what I call meaning renewal practices, activities that reconnect them with their core values and long-term vision. These practices might include writing letters to your future self, describing how your current changes will impact your life in 5 to 10 years, volunteering or mentoring others who are beginning similar transformation journeys, creating visual reminders of your deeper motivations and placing them in your environment, regularly reviewing and updating your personal mission statement or life vision. But the final piece that ties it all together involves understanding how to use what I call legacy thinking to maintain motivation during the most challenging periods of your transformation journey. Legacy thinking involves regularly considering how your current choices will impact not just your immediate future, but the trajectory of your entire life. When you're tempted to abandon positive changes, you ask yourself, what kind of person will I become if I continue on this path? What kind of life will I create? What example will I set for others? This perspective shift transforms temporary discomfort into meaningful investment in your future self. It helps you see beyond immediate challenges to the long-term compound effects of consistent positive choices. The real breakthrough comes when you realize that transformation maintenance isn't a burden to be endured. It's a skill to be mastered, a practice to be refined, and ultimately a way of life that becomes more rewarding over time. When you develop true transformation maintenance competency, you don't just achieve your goals. You become the type of person who naturally creates positive change in every area of life. You develop what I call transformation momentum, a self-reinforcing cycle where each maintained change makes future changes easier and more sustainable. The people who master this system don't just transform their lives once, they become transformation artists, continuously evolving and growing throughout their entire lives. They understand that the goal isn't to reach a final destination, but to develop the capacity for lifelong growth and positive change. Your transformation journey doesn't end when you achieve your initial goals. It begins when you develop the systems and skills to maintain those changes forever, and then use that foundation to continue growing into the person you're truly capable of becoming. The choice is yours. You can continue the cycle of starting and stopping, achieving temporary progress only to watch it slip away. Or you can master the art of transformation maintenance and join the small percentage of people who create lasting, meaningful change that compounds over time. The tools are in your hands, the science is clear, the path is mapped out before you. The only question that remains is, what kind of person will you choose to become, and what kind of life will you choose to create? Your transformation starts now, not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are perfect. Now, and with the right systems in place, it will last forever.